I want you to picture a scenario for a second. It's late at night, maybe around like 11:30 or so.
Right.
The house is completely quiet. The lights are off. And there is literally only one single source of illumination in the entire room.
The smartphone glow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That harsh, cold blue glow of your smartphone just reflecting off your face.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
Right. You're lying in bed, your eyes are burning, but your thumb just keeps endlessly swiping up. You're just scrolling through your social media feeds.
Just kind of doom scrolling into the night.
Totally doom scrolling. And like, what exactly are you looking at? Well, you see a 16-year-old kid who just got a brand new Ferrari for their birthday.
With the massive red bow on it, I'm sure.
Oh, obviously a giant red bow. And then you scroll a little more and you see a former classmate, someone who literally used to eat paste in the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And they just sold a tech startup for like $2 billion. And you scroll again, and there are, 8 different people posting these flawless, sun-drenched, heavily filtered photos.
Like destination weddings in Bali or something.
Yes, Bali, the Amalfi Coast, wherever. Just looking like they have never experienced a single moment of sadness or indigestion or self-doubt in their entire lives.
Right. Just perfect existences.
Meanwhile, you're sitting there in your pajamas with, like, a mysterious stain on the knee.
Yeah, eating stale crackers.
Exactly. Just trying to remember if you paid the electric bill or if you fed the cat. And right there, in the pit of your stomach, this heavy, sinking feeling starts to take hold.
That anxiety.
Yes, creeping, pervasive modern disease. It's this whispering voice that just tells you that you aren't doing enough.
That you aren't being enough.
Right, that your life is somehow fundamentally inadequate.
It is an incredibly common, almost universal experience right now.
It really is.
Because we are living in an era that is defined by a very specific, highly engineered kind of psychological pressure.
Yeah.
It's a pressure that honestly simply did not exist for the vast majority of human history.
Exactly. It's a societal pressure to be, well, extraordinary.
Yeah.
Culture bombards us every single day with this toxic positivity.
Everywhere you look.
We are told through every advertisement, every lifestyle guru, to be happier, be healthier, be the absolute best version of yourself.
Smarter, faster, richer.
Sexier, infinitely more popular. The unspoken expectation is that we should, wake up at 4 in the morning.
Oh, yeah, the extreme morning routines.
Meditate for an hour, be completely perfect, and basically crap out 12-karat gold nuggets before breakfast.
While kissing your photogenic family goodbye.
Exactly. Before flying your personal electric helicopter to a job that is going to single-handedly save the entire planet.
It's exhausting.
It is absolutely exhausting just thinking about it.
And the tragic irony of all of this, the real psychological trap here is that this relentless, breathless pursuit of being extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's exactly what is making us so profoundly miserable.
Yeah.
By setting this impossible baseline for what constitutes a normal or a good life, we are essentially guaranteeing our own persistent disappointment.
Which is exactly why we are taking this deep dive today. We are immersing ourselves in the core concepts of Mark Manson's profoundly disruptive source text, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck.
It's a phenomenal book.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore a deeply counterintuitive solution to this modern anxiety.
Right.
Because the answer to our digital overload, the cure for our chronic feelings of inadequacy, it isn't about trying harder to be positive.
It's definitely not about hacking your morning routine.
No, it's actually about learning how to stop caring about the wrong things. So, okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin to dismantle this culture of extreme, relentless positivity?
Well, I think the best place to start is actually with someone who represents the absolute polar opposite of everything you just described.
I like that.
If we want an anti-hero to shatter the modern myth of success and relentless self-improvement, we really have to look at the life of the writer Charles Bukowski.
Wait, Charles Bukowski? I'm familiar with his poetry, but from what I know about his personal life, this guy was a total disaster.
Oh, what absolute disaster.
Are we seriously going to hold up a notorious deadbeat as a role model for a healthy life philosophy?
That is exactly the friction we need to explore here. Because Bukowski was, by any conventional metric, a complete catastrophe of a human being for the vast majority of his life.
Right.
He was a chronic alcoholic, a degenerate gambler, a womanizer, a cheapskate, and a deadbeat.
Just checking all the bad boxes.
Every single one. And he desperately wanted to be a famous writer. But for decades, literally 30 years, his work was universally rejected by almost every magazine, journal, and publisher he submitted it to.
30 years of rejection. Oh, man.
And the rejection letters didn't just say, no thank you. They called his writing crude, disgusting, and completely unpublishable.
That is brutal.
It was. And as the weight of those rejections piled up year after year, he sank deeper and deeper into an alcohol-fueled depression.
I can imagine.
He worked a soul-crushing day job as a letter filer at a post office, making terrible money, which of course he immediately blew on cheap booze and betting on the ponies at the racetrack.
So he's just stuck in this awful cycle?
Completely stuck. He would routinely wake up, passed out on his own floor, just surrounded by empty bottles and eviction notices.
So 30 years of just grinding misery, rejection, and self-destruction. There's no silver lining there. How does this possibly lead to a healthy mindset?
Well, the turning point comes when Bukowski is 50 years old.
Okay.
After a lifetime of abject failure and self-loathing, an editor at a very small independent publishing house took a weird, inexplicable liking to his raw, ugly style, and they offered him a tiny shot. So Bukowski, having literally nothing left to lose, wrote his first novel, simply titled Post Office, in just 3 weeks.
3 weeks, wow.
Yeah. And that novel launched his career. He eventually became wildly successful, selling over 2 million books and reaching cult status worldwide.
That's incredible.
It is. Now, if modern culture were to package that story today, how do you think they would frame it?
Oh, I mean, it would be a glossy Hollywood movie with a soaring, inspirational orchestral soundtrack.
Exactly.
The tagline would be like, he never gave up. He believed in himself when no one else did.
Right. He persisted against impossible odds.
Yeah, and finally achieved his dreams. It would be the ultimate resilience narrative.
Exactly. But framing it that way completely misses the fundamental reality of who he was.
What do you mean?
The genius of Bukowski's eventual success wasn't that he possessed some magical hidden determination to be a winner.
Okay.
It wasn't that he secretly believed in his own exceptionalism. What's absolutely fascinating here is what he chose for his epitaph.
On his gravestone?
Yes, if you go to his grave today, on his tombstone, underneath his name, it literally reads, "Don't try."
Don't try. That is so jarring.
Isn't
It goes against every single motivational speech ever given in the history of the world.
But that was his superpower. Bukowski knew he was a loser. He accepted it completely down to his bones.
Wow.
His success stemmed entirely from his unflinching, radical comfort with himself as a failure. He never tried to be anything other than exactly what he was.
So he just dropped the act completely.
Completely. He didn't try to polish his image or pretend he was some misunderstood genius. He just wrote honestly about the absolute worst, most degrading parts of himself without a single ounce of hesitation or shame.
That takes a weird kind of courage.
It does. And crucially, fame didn't magically make him a better, more enlightened person.
Yeah.
He still showed up to his poetry readings completely hammered.
Oh, geez.
He still verbally abused his audiences. He still slept around. We aren't saying he is a moral role model here.
Right. Obviously not.
But he's an epistemological one. His ability to not give a feck about success, to completely abandon the project of trying to be a winner, it gave him the ultimate freedom to just be brutally, unapologetically honest.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You're saying the very act of trying to be a winner inherently reinforces the idea that you are currently a loser.
Exactly.
So if trying to be positive all the time, if desperately trying to be this flawless winner is actually the thing making us miserable, well, we need to understand the underlying mechanics of why that is.
We do.
If our brains are actively working against us, what is the psychological trap we're stuck in?
The trap is a psychological mechanism that the author of our source text brilliantly calls the feedback loop from hell.
The feedback loop from hell. I love that name.
It's perfect. To understand it, we have to look at an insidious quirk of human consciousness. You see, very few animals on Earth can think cogent, abstract thoughts.
Sure.
But we humans have the evolutionary luxury of being able to have thoughts about our thoughts. It's called metacognition.
It's the miracle of the frontal lobe. We can reflect on our own existence.
Right. It is a miracle for planning for the future or building societies, but it is an absolute curse when applied to our own emotional states.
How so?
Let's break down the exact agonizing mechanics of this loop. Imagine you get extremely anxious about confronting somebody in your life.
Like a toxic boss or a bad roommate.
Exactly. The anxiety is palpable, your heart is racing, your palms are sweaty. But then, because you possess metacognition, You are acutely aware of your anxiety.
Oh, I see where this is going.
You start looking at your own trembling hands and wondering why you're so anxious about such a simple confrontation. Now, you are becoming anxious about the fact that you are anxious.
Oh, man, double anxiety. You've just layered a secondary emotional reaction over the primary one.
Exactly. Now your anxiety about your anxiety is causing even more anxiety.
Or consider anger.
Okay.
You get pissed off about something incredibly stupid, like dropping your keys when your hands are full.
Which happens to the best of us.
Right, a normal, fleeting flash of frustration. But then you realize that getting pissed off so easily makes you a shallow, reactive person.
Yeah. You hate that fact about yourself. So you get angry at yourself for getting angry. Now you're angry at yourself for getting angry about being angry.
It spirals endlessly.
It really does. You feel guilty about feeling guilty. You get profoundly sad about the fact that you're always so sad.
It's like standing in an elevator with mirrors on both sides, just staring into an infinite receding tunnel of bad feelings.
That's a great way to picture it.
But why is this loop so incredibly prevalent right now? I mean, human beings have had metacognition for thousands of years. Why is the feedback loop from hell a uniquely modern epidemic?
Well, if we connect this to the broader socioeconomic picture, consumer culture and social media have systematically bred a generation that genuinely believes experiencing negative emotions is fundamentally not okay.
Like fear, guilt, anxiety, or sadness.
Exactly. The entire advertising industry is built on the premise that if you feel bad, it's because you haven't bought the right product yet.
Wow.
If you look online, everyone is supposedly having a grand old time 24/7. So when you feel like garbage for even 5 minutes, you are immediately bombarded with high-definition images of people who seem totally fulfilled and ecstatic.
And you can't help but feel that there's something uniquely broken or defective about you.
Precisely. Back in the day, a couple hundred years ago, if a farmer felt terrible, he just thought, wow, I feel like a cow turd today.
Right.
But the cows still need feeding, so back to shoveling hay.
Yeah.
The negative emotion was just accepted as a mundane part of the human condition.
But now we feel bad about feeling bad. We're literally punishing ourselves for the basic, unavoidable biological reality of experiencing negative emotions. We think feeling bad means we are failing at life.
Which is why we have to introduce a profoundly important concept from the mid-20th century philosopher Alan Watts.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's known as the backwards law. This is the core mind-bender of this whole philosophy, and it directly addresses the feedback loop from hell. The backwards law states that the desire for a more positive experience is, in itself, an inherently negative experience. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is, in itself, a positive experience.
Okay, I have to pause here, because that sounds like a Zen riddle, but when you really chew on it, it makes total sense.
It does.
It sounds exactly like emotional quicksand.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah. The more you flail around trying to escape the negative feeling, the more you desperately try to claw your way out of the anxiety or the grief or the sadness, the faster you sink into it.
Exactly.
You exhaust yourself fighting the reality of your emotion.
Right.
You actually have to stop struggling, relax your body into the mud, and accept the negative feeling in order to float to the surface.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Struggling against the quicksand is what kills you, not the quicksand itself. Pursuing the positive actively reinforces the fact that you lack it in the first place.
That's deep.
Think about wealth. The more you desperately want to be rich, the poorer and more unworthy you feel, regardless of how much money you actually make, because the desire highlights your perceived lack.
Yeah.
The more you desperately, frantically want to be happy and loved, the lonelier and more alienated you become because you are constantly monitoring your own happiness levels instead of just living.
Makes perfect sense.
The author of the source text actually shares a visceral, deeply illustrative metaphor from his youth to explain this.
What is it?
He describes an intense LSD hallucination he had where he was walking toward a house. But the bizarre physics of the hallucination dictated that the more steps he took toward the house, the farther away the house got from him.
That is wild.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying hallucination, but an absolutely perfect metaphor.
Huh?
Chasing the house pushes the house away.
Exactly.
Chasing happiness pushes happiness away. So this brings us to a massive looming question. If we aren't supposed to chase positive experiences, and if constantly trying to avoid pain is a psychological trap that just breeds more pain,
Right.
Where does actual sustained happiness come from? How do we actually build a good life if we aren't chasing the good stuff?
To answer that accurately, We have to look at the very nature of problems themselves. And to help us understand this, the author introduces a fantastic, hilarious, hypothetical superhero.
Oh, disappointment panda. I absolutely love this part of the material.
It's the best.
Okay, I need the listener to visualize this. Imagine a superhero, but instead of a sleek, majestic cape and a chiseled jaw, he wears a cheap, cheesy eye mask
Yeah.
and a t-shirt with a giant T on it that is way, way too small for his big, protruding, hairy panda belly.
Just a ridiculous image.
And his superpower isn't flying or super strength or laser vision. His superpower is going door to door, exactly like an old-school vacuum salesman, telling people the brutal, harsh truths about themselves that they desperately need to hear but entirely refuse to accept.
He just rings your doorbell, waits for you to answer in your bathrobe, and drops truth bomb.
It.
He'd say, sure, making a ton of money makes you feel good and buys nice things, but it won't make your kids actually love or respect you.
Ouch.
Or he'd knock on the next door and say, what you consider being a supportive friend is really just your constant, neurotic attempt to impress people so they won't abandon you. Have a nice day. And then he just waddles away.
It's hilarious, but it's also incredibly profound.
Mm-hmm.
Disappointment panda is the hero we actually need, not the one we want.
Exactly.
Because by forcing us to face these uncomfortable truths, he brings us face to face with the reality of suffering, instead of letting us hide behind toxic positivity.
And this brings us to a fundamental biological and evolutionary truth that we constantly try to ignore.
Which is?
Pain and suffering are not bugs in human evolution. They are features.
The features.
Yes. They are highly complex, biologically useful mechanisms. Pain is nature's preferred agent for inspiring change and ensuring survival. Let's look at physical pain.
Okay.
When you walk through your living room in the dark and violently stub your toe on the coffee table,
The worst.
the excruciating physical pain teaches you your physical limits. It sends an immediate, unignorable signal to your nervous system. Do not walk into solid wooden objects. It damages the chassis.
Right. If we couldn't feel physical pain, we'd accidentally burn our hands off on stoves or bleed to death from miter cuts because we wouldn't notice. Pain keeps us intact.
Exactly.
And psychological pain works exactly the same way, doesn't it?
Precisely. The heartbreak of a cheating ex, the sting of being fired from a job, the deep embarrassment of failing publicly, these teach you your psychological limits.
They show us what to avoid.
They teach you what behaviors to avoid in the future, how to protect your emotional core, how to pick better, more reliable partners, or how to work harder. The human brain doesn't actually register much of a functional difference between physical pain and psychological pain.
Really?
Yeah, they light up remarkably similar neural pathways.
So feeling emotional pain isn't a sign that our lives are broken. It's a sign that our internal software is functioning exactly as intended.
Exactly. We have evolved to live with a baseline degree of dissatisfaction and insecurity.
Why is that?
Because the completely contented, perfectly happy creature doesn't do anything. The mildly dissatisfied creature is the one that's going to invent the wheel, plant crops, innovate, build shelters, and survive the winter.
Dissatisfaction is the engine of progress.
It is, and this leads directly to the core thesis regarding happiness. Problems never, ever stop.
They don't.
They never go away. They just get exchanged or upgraded.
Upgraded problems. That is such a vital reframing. We always think there's some finish line where the problems stop. Once I get this promotion, I'm done. Once I get married, I'm done.
But the finish line is an illusion. Think about it in practical terms. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on earth, has money problems.
Right.
The homeless guy freezing outside the local convenience store also has money problems. The fundamental nature and severity of the problems are vastly different, but the existence of money problems is a constant for both men.
That's a stark comparison.
Buffett just has much, much better money problems. He has to worry about international tax law and billions in capital allocation, whereas the homeless man has to worry about surviving the night.
But the problem state remains.
Therefore, if problems are constant, happiness cannot possibly be the absence of problems. True happiness is the activity of solving problems.
The activity itself.
Yes. If you are constantly avoiding your problems, or if you feel like you are saddled with problems you absolutely can't solve, you will be miserable. The secret sauce to a fulfilling life is in the solving itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the author grounds this in a deeply personal story that I think a lot of people will relate to.
Oh, the rock star story.
Yeah. He talks about his lifelong ambition to be a rock star. For half his life, he was obsessed with it. He would close his eyes and intensely visualize playing guitar on a massive stage to screaming crowds, people losing their minds to his solos.
It's a very common fantasy.
He thought it was his absolute destiny.
Yeah.
But year after year passed, and he never actually did it. He never put in the real work.
Right.
And it took him years of struggling with this supposed failure, feeling like a coward, to realize a very harsh truth provided by his own internal disappointment panda.
He didn't actually want it.
What's fascinating here is the precise distinction he makes. It completely changes how we view ambition. He realized he was deeply in love with the result.
The stage, the crowds.
The image of himself on stage, the adulation, the groupies, the summit of the mountain. But he was not in love with the process.
The work.
He fundamentally hated the climb. He hated the idea of hauling 40 pounds of heavy gear onto crowded subways at midnight. He hated the broken strings, the blown-out amplifiers, the tedious drudgery of rehearsing the same 4 chords in dingy, terrible-smelling basements for years with no audience.
He wanted the reward without the struggle. He wanted the victory without the fight. He wanted the champion's belt without getting punched in the face in the training gym.
And the universe simply does not work that way. No, it doesn't. Joy doesn't just spontaneously sprout out of the ground because we wish for it. It has to be actively earned through the intentional choosing and managing of our struggles.
Which raises an incredibly important question. Perhaps it is the ultimate psychological question we can ask ourselves.
What's that?
We constantly ask ourselves and each other, what do you want out of life? And everyone gives the exact same predictable answers.
Fulfillment, money, love.
Right.
Right.
Everyone says they want a fulfilling job, a loving family, to be healthy, to be happy. That's the easy question. The real determinant of how your life will actually turn out is a different, much darker question entirely.
And that's it.
What pain do you want in your life? What are you willing to struggle for?
Wow. What pain do you want? That really stops you right in your tracks because it strips away the fantasy.
It does.
If you say you want the corner office and the CEO title, you have to genuinely want the 60-hour work weeks, the vicious corporate politics, the constant stress, and the time away from your family.
Yeah, so
If you want the amazing fitness model physique, you have to legitimately appreciate the physical pain of the gym, the sweat, the calluses, and the extreme deprivation of a strict diet.
yeah.
You can't just want the view from the top. You have to love the brutal climb.
Precisely. You cannot have a pain-free life. It is biologically and physically impossible. But accepting this struggle, intentionally choosing your pain, is incredibly difficult in a modern society that constantly, aggressively tells us we deserve to have it all instantly without suffering.
Yeah, we're told it should be easy.
This deeply ingrained expectation of a frictionless, perfectly happy life leads us directly into the cultural disease of entitlement.
Yes, the entitlement epidemic. And to illustrate this perfectly, the source material introduces us to a guy named Jimmy.
Oh, Jimmy.
We all know a Jimmy. You probably have one in your extended family or friend group. Jimmy is the wildly delusional startup guy.
So annoying.
You run into him at a coffee shop, ask him how he's doing, and he immediately starts monologuing. He rattles off some prestigious firm he's supposedly consulting for, a revolutionary app he's currently getting angel investors for, a charity gala he's keynoting next month.
Oh, he has a big talker.
He's constantly name-dropping people he met once at a party, always on the absolute verge of making billions and changing the world. But the bleak reality.
The reality is much sadder.
Jimmy is a complete deadbeat. He's 30 years old, smoking weed on his cousin's couch, maxing out his company credit cards at fancy restaurants, trying to impress people who don't care about him, and completely leeching off his family's dwindling money.
And the most dangerous, insidious part about Jimmy isn't just that he's a fraud. It's that Jimmy genuinely, deeply believes his own delusions.
That's the crazy part.
He possesses a bulletproof, impenetrable level of self-confidence. If you try to criticize him or point out that his app doesn't actually have any code written, you aren't offering constructive feedback.
In his mind, you're a hater.
In his mind, you're just a hater who is incredibly jealous of his impending genius. His ego is hermetically sealed against reality.
Wow.
To understand how society ended up producing millions of Jimmys, we have to trace the history back to the self-esteem movement that began in the late 1960s and 1970s.
Ah, the dawn of the participation trophy era.
Yeah.
The genesis of modern entitlement.
Exactly. The psychological and educational consensus at the time pushed a very specific hypothesis. They believed that if people just had positive thoughts about themselves, high self-esteem, it would naturally lead to better, tangible societal outcomes.
Like what?
They theorized it would lead to lower crime rates, better academic grades, higher employment, and less drug abuse. So the entire educational system pivoted.
That changed everything.
They instituted massive grade inflation so kids wouldn't feel bad about failing. They gave out gleaming trophies just for showing up to the soccer field regardless of effort. Kids were given daily homework assignments to write down all the reasons why they were uniquely special and destined for greatness. The underlying mantra of the culture became that every single person is inherently exceptional.
But the data is in on that grand experiment, and it backfired spectacularly, didn't it?
It was a catastrophic failure of applied psychology. It turns out that merely feeling good about yourself doesn't actually mean anything if you don't have a legitimate, reality-based reason to feel good.
Makes sense.
Teaching people they are exceptional without requiring any actual achievement or overcoming any real adversity didn't create a generation of driven visionaries. It created a population overflowing with Jimmies.
It created entitled people.
People who feel entirely entitled to the massive rewards of life without ever having to do the grueling, painful work required to earn them.
And this ties directly into what the author calls the tyranny of exceptionalism, which is heavily fueled by our media diet. We have to look at the environment we live in.
The internet.
Yeah, the internet, the algorithms governing social media, the 24-hour cable news cycle, they all operate on a ruthless economy of attention. The only information that actually breaks through the endless noise and gets clicks is the absolute extremes.
The 0.0001%.
The 99.99 percentile of the human experience.
Right.
We only see the absolute best athletes, the absolute worst criminals, the most hilariously funny jokes, the most terrifying disasters, the most beautiful people.
Yes. And statistically speaking, the vast majority of human life is actually quite humdrum, routine, and deeply average.
Very average.
We spend most of our time doing laundry, commuting, answering emails, and sleeping. But because our brains are constantly flooded with extreme top-tier information all day, every day, we are neurologically tricked into thinking that being exceptional is the new baseline normal.
Which sets us up for failure.
The psychological consequence is devastating. If we look at our own mundane lives and see that we aren't exceptional, we feel intensely insecure, desperate, and worthless. We feel like monumental failures just for being normal.
Okay, I have to push back on this pretty hard because I can hear the listener practically screaming at their device right now.
Go for it.
If we just accept that we are fundamentally average, doesn't that mean we just surrender? Doesn't accepting mediocrity kill all ambition? Think about someone like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or Steve Jobs.
The greats.
These people achieved literal greatness, and they absolutely believed they were special. They were famously arrogant about their exceptionalism.
Yeah.
If they had just accepted being average, we wouldn't have the iPhone or 6 Chicago Bulls championships. So isn't accepting that you aren't destined for greatness just a cop-out to sit on the couch and achieve nothing?
That is the most common and, frankly, the most logical defense of exceptionalism.
No.
But it fundamentally misunderstands the internal mechanics of how true greatness is achieved.
How so?
It's a nuanced distinction between confidence in your potential and entitlement about your current state. Let's look at your examples. Jordan, Bryant. Yes, they had massive egos later in life, but the rare people who actually become truly exceptional at something do not achieve that greatness because they sit around believing they are inherently magically special without effort.
So what drives them?
They become amazing because they are obsessed with improvement. And you can only be obsessed with improvement if you fundamentally believe that your current state is not good enough. That you are currently flawed, lacking, or average in some critical way.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the pivot there. If you already think you're great, inherently, like Jimmy, there is zero internal motivation to put in the agonizing hours of practice.
Exactly.
Jimmy doesn't practice coding because he thinks he's already a tech visionary. Kobe Bryant was in the gym at 4 in the morning because he was terrified of being outworked, because he recognized the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be.
Precisely. The entitlement mindset assumes the greatness is a given trait. The anti-entitlement mindset assumes greatness is a continuous, painful action.
That's a huge difference.
All this societal messaging about everyone being inherently extraordinary is just empty calories for your ego. It feels good in the moment, like a sugar rush, but it makes you psychologically diabetic.
That's a vivid image.
The real ticket to emotional health is eating your metaphorical veggies. Accepting the mundane, sometimes bitter truths of life. Accepting that your daily actions might not matter in the grand scheme of the universe, and that most of your life will be boring and unglamorous.
And what happens when you do that?
Once you ingest that bitter vegetable, something magical happens. The crushing, suffocating pressure to prove yourself to the world is lifted. You are freed from the anxiety of always feeling inadequate. You can actually pursue what you want, whether it's basketball, coding, or just being a good parent, without the paralyzing burden of lofty, world-changing expectations.
So if we aren't going to measure our lives by the grand metric of being extraordinary or world-changing, how do we measure success? What ruler are we using to measure a life well lived?
It all comes down to values.
This brings us to the absolute core of the book, the necessity of actively examining and choosing our values. And there is a phenomenal, heartbreaking comparison in the text between two kicked-out musicians that illustrates the power of chosen metrics perfectly.
Let's delve deeply into the first story, the story of Dave Mustaine.
Okay.
The year is 1983. Mustaine is a young, brilliantly talented, heavily aggressive lead guitarist. He's in a metal band that has just traveled across the country to New York to record their very first album.
Exciting times.
But Mustaine has a severe drinking problem, and he's violent. So just days before they are scheduled to record, his bandmates wake him up, tell him he's out of the band, hand him a Greyhound bus ticket, and send him packing back to Los Angeles.
Just like that.
No warning, no second chances, just immediate exile.
I can't even imagine the sensory details of that bus ride. 4 days, sitting on a cramped, smelly bus, watching the landscape roll by, fueled entirely by absolute rage, humiliation, and a deep sense of betrayal.
It was intense.
On that bus ride, Mustaine makes a vow. He vows to start a new band. And he vows that his new band will be so massively successful, so unbelievably famous, that his old bandmates will see him everywhere, on TV, in magazines, on MTV, and they will bathe in the bitter tears of their own regret. He was out for pure, unadulterated blood.
And the incredible part of the story is that he actually succeeded.
He really did.
He poured every ounce of his anger into his music. He formed the band Megadeth. Megadeth went on to become one of the pioneers of thrash metal. They sold over 25 million albums worldwide. They toured stadiums across the globe. And Mustaine became a verified legend in the heavy metal world.
That's incredible success.
He made tens of millions of dollars. By any normal societal metric, wealth, fame, influence, legacy, he was phenomenally, incredibly successful.
But there is a massive crushing catch to this story.
There is. The band that kicked him out that morning in New York, well, it was Metallica.
Metallica.
And as successful as Megadeth was, Metallica went on to become an absolute cultural juggernaut. They sold over 180 million albums. They are considered one of the greatest, most successful rock bands in the history of human existence.
It's hard to compete with that.
And because of this unavoidable fact, decades later, in a rare, incredibly intimate documentary interview, a tearful Dave Mustaine admitted something staggering.
What did he say?
Despite the millions of dollars, the millions of adoring fans, the gold records on his wall, he still considered himself a fundamental failure.
It is genuinely mind-blowing to hear that. A multi-millionaire rock god crying on camera because he feels like a loser? Why? Because of the specific metric he subconsciously chose on that bus ride in 1983.
It's his core value.
Exactly. His core value, the measuring stick for his entire existence, was be more successful than Metallica.
Yeah.
And because he failed that one highly specific, incredibly difficult metric, his brain registered his entire life, despite all the money and fame, as a complete failure.
No. To truly understand the power of metrics, we have to contrast Mustaine's story with the story of another kicked-out musician, Pete Best.
Another famous exile.
The year is 1962. Best is the drummer for a scrappy little rock band from Liverpool. By all accounts, he was the best-looking guy in the group, he had the most female fans, and he was the most professional.
Sounds like a good position to be in.
But right before they were slated to record their first real record, the other three guys in the band, John, Paul, and George, had their manager quietly and unceremoniously fire him.
John, Paul, and George.
Yep. They replaced him with a goofy-looking guy with a big nose named Ringo. Within 6 months, Beatlemania erupted across the globe.
The Beatles. The most famous faces on the planet. The biggest cultural phenomena of the 20th century. Pete Best missed out on becoming a billionaire cultural icon, literally a household name forever, by a matter of a few days.
It's a staggering loss.
You want to talk about pain? He understandably fell into a deep, dark, agonizing depression. He watched his former friends conquer the world while he faded into obscurity. He even attempted suicide in 1968.
But he survived the attempt. And decades later, in a 1994 interview, Pete Best said something that completely contradicts everything we assume about success and happiness.
What was it?
He stated, unequivocally, "I'm happier than I would have been with the Beatles."
How is that even mathematically possible? How can anyone say that and actually mean it?
He explained that the devastating loss of the band forced a radical shift in his life. Getting kicked out led him to meet the woman who would become his wife, which led to the birth of his children and eventually his grandchildren.
Completely different path.
Best suffered greatly, yes, but eventually he did something Mustaine never did. He actively changed his values. He changed his internal metrics.
He shifted the goalposts.
Exactly. He stopped measuring himself against global fame, historical legacy, and the success of his former bandmates. He started valuing entirely different things: a simple life, a stable and loving marriage, and the quiet joy of a big family.
That's beautiful.
He still played drums in local pubs, but purely for the love of the music. And because he chose metrics that were entirely within his control, he became genuinely, deeply happy.
Two kicked-out musicians. The one who became a global superstar felt like a miserable failure because he held on to a shitty value.
Yep.
The one who fell into absolute obscurity became genuinely happy because he actively chose a good value. This contrast perfectly sets up the absolute necessity of defining what actually makes a value shitty. We need to know what to avoid. The author lists 4 major ones that plague modern society.
Let's meticulously break them down because they are everywhere. First, pleasure.
Pleasure.
Pleasure is a false god. It's the most superficial form of life satisfaction, the easiest to obtain and the easiest to lose. It's the dopamine hit from eating a donut, buying a new shirt, or getting a like on social media.
Instant gratification.
But research consistently shows that people who focus their primary energy on seeking superficial pleasures end up far more anxious, emotionally unstable, and depressed.
Why is that?
Because pleasure is a byproduct. It is an effect of happiness, not the cause. If you chase it directly, you are just running on a hedonic treadmill, constantly needing a bigger hit just to feel normal.
That makes a lot of sense. The second wildly prevalent shitty value is material success. Measuring your human worth by the badge on your car, the size of your lawn, or the brand of your watch.
Another trap.
The psychological data on this is incredibly robust. Research shows that once your basic physical needs are met, food, shelter, basic security, the correlation between money and happiness rapidly approaches zero. Working yourself into an early grave, ignoring your family on weekends just to buy a slightly nicer car than your neighbor, is basically killing yourself for absolutely nothing.
The third shitty value is always being right.
Ooh, this one is tough for a lot of people.
Human brains are incredibly inefficient, biased machines. We misjudge probabilities, we succumb to massive cognitive biases, we misremember facts, and we make emotional decisions disguised as logical ones.
Or messy.
If your core metric for success is being right all the time, you will inevitably struggle to rationalize your own continuous mistakes.
Yeah.
You will become defensive and arrogant. But more importantly, needing to be right fundamentally prevents you from learning.
You can't grow if you're already perfect.
Exactly. It closes you off to new perspectives. It is far more helpful and far less stressful to simply assume you are fundamentally ignorant and always have room to grow.
And the fourth shitty value, which loops perfectly back to the beginning of our discussion, is staying positive.
Toxic positivity.
Right. It's the toxic idea that everything is a hidden opportunity, that you should smile even when your house is burning down. Constant positivity is just a sophisticated form of emotional avoidance. It denies the existence of life's genuine problems. And as we established, if you deny your problems, you rob yourself of the essential chance to solve them. And solving problems is the only way to generate true happiness.
So if those are the bad ones, how do we distinguish and select good values?
Good question.
The criteria are remarkably clear. Good values are reality-based, socially constructive, and internally controllable.
You mean example?
Let's take honesty as an example. You have 100% control over whether you tell the truth in a given moment. It reflects the reality of a situation rather than a fantasy, and it builds trust with others, making it socially constructive.
And bad values.
Bad values are superstitious, socially destructive, and reliant on external circumstances. Popularity is a terrible value because it is entirely out of your control. It relies entirely on the fleeting whims and opinions of other people.
This is a major turning point in the philosophy. Once we consciously pick internal controllable values like honesty, curiosity, or humility, everything shifts. Because if the value is internal, we can no longer point our fingers and blame the outside world when things go wrong.
Right.
We can't blame our boss, the economy, or our parents, which forces us into a very uncomfortable, highly exposing place: absolute responsibility.
Which leads us directly to the incredible story of William James.
Who was he?
Born in the 19th century into a wealthy, prominent family, James suffered from horrific, debilitating health issues from a young age. He experienced bouts of temporary blindness, severe stomach conditions that prevented him from eating normally, and back spasms so acutely painful he couldn't even stand up.
That sounds agonizing.
It was. He spent his time painting, trying to be an artist, but no one liked his art. His own father openly ridiculed him as a lazy failure, a hypochondriac, especially when compared to his highly successful, famous siblings, like his brother, the novelist Henry James. William James was deeply depressed, utterly lost, and intensely suicidal.
But then something changed.
Yeah. During this period of extreme despair, he reads something by the philosopher Charles Peirce, and it triggers a radical idea. He decides to conduct a psychological experiment on himself.
Not experiment.
He writes in his diary that he is going to spend one entire year, 365 days, believing that he is 100% responsible for everything that occurs in his life, no matter what it is, no matter who caused it.
Everything.
He would take complete, unadulterated ownership of his circumstances, regardless of the staggering odds against him.
And he made a pact with himself, didn't he? If his life did not improve after 1 year of taking absolute responsibility, he would end his own life.
A dark pact, but yes.
But the experiment worked. By taking absolute responsibility, he stopped blaming his father, he stopped blaming his frail body, and he started focusing entirely on what he could control.
His mind.
It's an amazing turnaround. He transformed his life. He went on to become a groundbreaking thinker, a Harvard professor, and is now widely recognized as the father of American psychology. The monumental realization he had is the bedrock foundation of all personal growth. We do not always control what happens to us in life, but we always, unconditionally, control how we interpret what happens to us and how we choose to respond to it.
But this is where people get incredibly tripped up. They aggressively conflate responsibility with fault.
Yes, this is huge.
This is the responsibility-fault fallacy. We need to meticulously break this down because it is the biggest hurdle for people accepting this philosophy.
It really is.
It is crucial to separate the two. Fault is strictly past tense. Responsibility is strictly present tense.
Okay, past versus present.
Fault results from choices that have already been made, often by other people or by random chance. Responsibility results from the choices you are currently making every single second of every day regarding how you handle your current reality.
I used to play a lot of poker, Texas Hold'em, and it always makes me think of this specific analogy.
Let's hear it.
Fault is the terrible hand of cards you were dealt by the dealer. You didn't choose the cards, you didn't stack the deck. It is entirely the dealer's fault, or the fault of statistical probability, that you are sitting there with a 2 and a 7 offsuit.
The worst starting hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But responsibility is how you choose to play those cards.
Yeah.
You didn't ask for them, but they are sitting in your hand. You pay the blind to be at the table, and they are yours to manage. You can fold, you can bluff, you can go all in, but you can't just sit there and yell at the dealer for an hour.
That's a very accurate, pragmatic way to look at it. The book provides some very extreme, purposefully shocking examples to drive this point past our emotional defenses.
Like what?
Imagine waking up one morning, opening your front door, and finding a newborn baby left in a basket on your doorstep.
Wait, a baby?
Yes! Now, it is absolutely categorically not your fault that the baby is there. You didn't put it there. But the baby is immediately, unavoidably your responsibility.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is extreme.
You have to choose what to do. Call the police, take the baby in, ignore it, and close the door. Whatever action you take or choose not to take, you are entirely responsible for the consequences of that choice.
Or take the man who gets mugged at gunpoint in an alley. It is entirely not his fault he was robbed. The criminal is at fault. But it is entirely the victim's responsibility to manage the emotional trauma, the legal fallout, calling his credit card companies, and choosing whether to let the fear dictate the rest of his life.
It's a harsh reality.
Or consider the heartbreaking example of the teenagers in the psychiatric study with severe OCD. They didn't choose their genetic disorder. It is not their fault that they suffer from intrusive, terrifying, paralyzing thoughts. But the cognitive behavioral therapy they undergo centers entirely on making them realize it is their responsibility to choose how to manage the disorder. They must take responsibility for not letting it destroy their lives.
What's deeply concerning is how modern culture, particularly the ecosystem of social media, actively, aggressively pushes against this concept of internal responsibility.
It's all about victimhood now.
Exactly. We are seeing a massive, culturally sanctioned rise in what can only be called victimhood chic. Social media algorithms inherently encourage people to push responsibility away by loudly claiming victimhood.
Sharing personal injustices.
Right, sharing those injustices, real or perceived, garners immediate attention, validation, and sympathy. It provides a highly addictive, temporary dopamine high of moral righteousness to point fingers and blame others.
What is a trap?
But the tragedy is that it keeps the person hopelessly trapped in their own suffering, because by refusing to take responsibility for moving forward, they surrender all their power to the people who wronged them.
Okay, let's bring this down to the practical level. I want to embody the listener here. I'm hearing all of this and I'm nodding along. I'm thinking, okay, I get it. I'm responsible. I need to pick better internal values. I need to stop blaming the dealer.
Yeah.
How?
The big question.
How do I actually change what I care about? Why is it so incredibly terrifying to actually take action and change my life?
To understand the how of change, we first have to deeply understand why we violently avoid changing in the first place.
Okay.
The author introduces a concept called Manson's law of avoidance. The law states, the more something threatens your current identity, the more you will subconsciously and consciously avoid doing it.
Even if it's a good thing.
Exactly. We inherently assume we only avoid bad things like pain or failure. But the truth is, we avoid good things like success, love, or health just as fiercely if they threaten how we currently view ourselves.
Oh, this is a deep psychological rabbit hole. So if my core identity, the story I tell myself and others, is that I am an undiscovered creative genius, actually finishing my screenplay and submitting it to agencies profoundly threatens that identity.
Precisely.
Because it gets rejected, the fantasy dies. I'm no longer an undiscovered genius. I'm just a guy who wrote a bad script. So I self-sabotage. I play video games instead of writing to protect the safe, comfortable, untested fantasy in my head.
You maintain psychological homeostasis. Or consider the insurance adjuster who constantly complains about his low salary, but actively avoids asking for a promotion or applying for new jobs, because doing so threatens his ingrained identity as the practical, reliable, put-upon worker who doesn't rock the boat.
People hate change.
Our brains are hardwired to crave and hold on to certainty above almost all else. There are fascinating psychological experiments where people are put in a room with a complex control panel of buttons and told to figure out how to get points on a screen.
I've heard of this.
Their brains will invent elaborate, utterly irrational sequences of actions, like tapping the ceiling, spinning around twice, and then pressing the blue button, just to create a sense of certainty about how the points are awarded, even when the researchers have explicitly programmed the points to be awarded completely at random.
That's hilarious and sad.
Certainty, even if it's based on a delusion, feels safe. But aggressively holding on to certainty is the absolute enemy of growth. Growth requires venturing into the terrifying unknown of who you might become.
So how do we break the paralysis? How do we bypass this evolutionary glitch of certainty and avoidance?
We apply a shockingly simple but profoundly effective mechanism that the author calls the do-something principle.
The do-something principle.
He discovered it during his early 20s. He was a young digital nomad. He had quit his safe corporate job to start an online business, but faced with the sheer terror of being entirely responsible for his own income, he froze.
Just paralyzed.
He spent his days downloading mindless computer games and avoiding actual work like it was the Ebola virus.
I think literally every single person listening has been there. You have a massive, life-altering project due or a thesis to write, and suddenly scrubbing the grout in the bathroom with a toothbrush becomes the most urgent, fascinating task in the world. It's peak avoidance.
Right. And he was paralyzed because he was waiting for a feeling. He was waiting for motivation to strike him like lightning. We typically think the mathematical formula of motivation works strictly linearly.
Emotional inspiration strikes, which leads to motivation, which finally leads to action.
But this is a trap. If you don't magically feel inspired, you do absolutely nothing. The realization he had is that motivation is not a linear chain. It is an endless loop.
And endless.
Action actually leads to inspiration, which leads to motivation, which leads to more action.
That completely flips the script.
Yeah.
Action isn't just the final effect of motivation, it's the initiating cause of it.
Exactly. So if you lack motivation, the actionable, entirely practical advice is incredibly simple. Just do something. Anything at all related to the goal.
Anyway.
If you want to write a novel, don't sit around waiting for the muse to dictate the perfect opening paragraph. Just sit down and write 200 incredibly crappy, terrible words.
Just get something on the page.
If you need to build a website for your business, just open the software and design the header. Don't worry about the rest. The mere physical act of doing something, even poorly, generates a small amount of momentum.
Gets the wheels turning.
It provides a tiny hit of inspiration, which then fuels the motivation to take the next small step. You stop waiting for the universe to inspire you, and you become your own self-sustaining engine of inspiration.
Just do something.
Yeah.
I love how incredibly freeing and low stakes that is. It removes all the pressure. But there is a flip side to this. To do something, to take action in one specific direction, you inherently have to commit to that path.
You do.
And committing to one path absolutely means saying no to all the other thousands of possible paths. Which brings us to the profound importance of boundaries and rejection.
Yes. Modern consumer culture constantly shrieks at us that more is better. More options, more travel experiences, more sexual partners, more clothes, more streaming services.
It's never enough.
But the author experienced the reality of the ultimate more lifestyle. He lived the digital nomad life, traveling the globe constantly, living out of a suitcase, having endless superficial options for years, and he eventually realized that absolute freedom by itself is empty. It means nothing.
It's the paradox of choice.
This is the well-documented paradox of choice. Having endless options actually sharply decreases our overall satisfaction because we suffer from decision fatigue, and we are constantly agonizingly aware of all the potential things we might be missing out on by choosing one thing over another.
The ultimate fear of missing out. FOMO on a macro, life-altering scale.
Exactly. True meaning, deep satisfaction, and actual freedom are only found through commitment. By intentionally narrowing our focus, committing to one geographical location, committing to one romantic partner, dedicating ourselves to mastering one single craft, we finally find depth.
Depth over breadth.
Breadth of experience is fine, even necessary when you are young and figuring out who you are. But depth is where the actual gold is buried. And valuing anything deeply inherently requires rejecting its alternatives.
You have to say no.
If you truly value your marriage, you must actively reject the temptation of infidelity. If you truly value mastering your craft, you must actively reject the comfort of endless distractions.
And this concept of rejection applies directly to the health of our relationships, specifically around the concept of boundaries. Entitled people inevitably ruin their relationships through poor or non-existent boundaries. The book describes this toxic dynamic perfectly by analyzing the dance between the victim and the saver.
In a deeply toxic, enmeshed relationship, the victim constantly demands that others take responsibility for their problems.
They suck the energy out of the room.
They use their ongoing suffering, their crises, to demand attention, affection, and resources from others. The saver, on the other hand, compulsively takes responsibility for the other person's problems because swooping in and fixing someone else makes them feel important, needed, and loved.
A match made in hell.
They are a perfect, endlessly dysfunctional match. They feed off each other's psychological pathologies.
It's a vicious cycle of codependency. But how does the listener know if they are in this trap? How can you tell if you are doing something for your partner out of genuine, unconditional love, or if you're just trapped in this toxic obligation dynamic of victim and saver?
The author provides a brilliant, highly confrontational litmus test for this exact scenario. Ask yourself honestly.
Okay, here we go.
If I refuse to do this favor or solve this problem for my partner, how would the fundamental nature of the relationship change? Or, conversely, if my partner refused to do something I demanded, how would the relationship change?
That's a scary question to ask.
If the truthful answer is that there would be a dramatic blowout, screaming matches, emotional blackmail, and broken plates, then the relationship is entirely conditional. It's built on a fragile foundation of obligation, entitlement, and manipulation, not genuine, unconditional acceptance.
That is a very tough pill to swallow for anyone currently realizing they might be a saver or a victim. But it's so necessary. Committing to a specific life, actively rejecting alternatives, setting firm boundaries, all of this requires a very sobering, mature perspective on the fact that we do not have endless time to figure all of this out.
Our time is finite.
Our time to choose our values is strictly limited. Which brings us to the final and perhaps the most intense, philosophically profound concept in the deep dive, the sunny side of death.
To truly understand our deepest motivations, we have to look at the groundbreaking work of cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker.
Okay.
He wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book called The Denial of Death, where he introduced the concept of immortality projects. Becker argued that all of human civilization and almost all of our individual actions are fundamentally driven by the subconscious terror of our own inevitable mortality.
The fear of death.
Because we are the only creatures aware that we are going to die, the anxiety of that realization is too much to bear. So we try to construct conceptual selves identities, legacies that we believe will live on past our physical deaths.
We want to leave a mark. We want our name carved into a university building, or to write a great novel, or to raise wildly successful children, or even just to be remembered as a really good guy. We give entirely too many frecks about our legacies as a psychological buffer against the terrifying, cold reality of our own cosmic insignificance.
Yes, we use our values to try and cheat death. And the author recounts a profoundly moving epiphany he had regarding this. He was sitting on his mother's couch, completely devastated, shortly after the tragic, sudden death of a close friend who drowned in the lake.
That's awful.
He was staring into the void, confronting the incomprehensible nothingness and randomness of death. And the radical realization he came to was this. If there is no inherent cosmic reason to do anything, if we are all destined for the same dirt, there is also no reason not to do anything.
No reason not to try.
In the face of absolute inevitable death, there is no logical reason to give in to the petty fears of embarrassment, social rejection, or shame.
That is the ultimate paradoxical liberator. Keeping the reality of death in the absolute forefront of your daily mind burns away all the superficial entitlement. It instantly incinerates the petty anxieties about what your coworkers think of your shoes or whether you have as much money as the guy next door.
It forces clarity.
It forces you to ask the only question that actually matters when the clock is ticking down. What mark will you leave when you are gone? How will you treat the people around you today?
By fully embracing our impermanence, by accepting the deeply uncomfortable truth that we are essentially just highly evolved cosmic dust, we become totally radically free. We become free to care only about what truly deeply matters.
Death is the only reliable compass by which we must orient all of our other values. When we constantly avoid thinking about our mortality, the superficial nonsense of life appears incredibly important. But when we bravely acknowledge death, the superficial vanishes, and only the truly important remains. Okay, we have covered an absolutely immense amount of psychological and philosophical ground today. We started with Bukowski's rejection of trying. We navigated the feedback loop from Hell and the Backwards Law. We met Disappointment Panda. We explored the pain of Dave Mustaine versus the peace of Pete Best. We dismantled the responsibility fallacy, unlocked the do something principle, and finally stared death right in the face. This has been a massive, intense production for the channel. Decode Deep Dive.
It really has. It challenges almost every default setting of modern life.
Listen, if any of this resonated with you today, if you felt that uncomfortable, squirming twinge of recognition when we talked about Jimmy, the delusional startup guy, or if you recognize your own relationships in the toxic victim-saver dynamic, I cannot urge you strongly enough to go buy Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Feck. Buy the physical book or the audiobook to support the author. We've only scratched the surface here today. You need the full, unfiltered experience of his brilliant, hilarious, deeply moving storytelling to really let these concepts rewire your brain and change your metrics.
And while you are at it, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. We would absolutely love to hear from you to continue this conversation. Leave a comment down below and tell us honestly. Which of the 4 shitty values, pleasure, material success, always being right, or staying positive, are you going to actively drop today?
Now, to leave you with one final lingering thought to chew on, we started this deep dive talking about that pervasive modern disease, that desire for a clean, perfectly positive, frictionless life. But life isn't clean. It is inherently messy, it is chaotic, and it is full of inevitable necessary pain. So if the ultimate uncomfortable truth is that one day you and every single person you have ever loved will die, and everything you currently stress about rapidly approaches absolute zero.
What is the one incredibly difficult, deeply meaningful, painful problem that you're actually excited to wake up and suffer for tomorrow?